So, despite the slow uploads, the format for my Elden Ring videos seems to be going well. Let's see how it'll work for other games. While I'm conflicted on that game, I do enjoy all the other Souls games, but I'm not going to play through multiple FromSoft games at the same time. Instead, there's another fantasy action RPG that I really enjoyed. Dragon's Dogma 2 received a very mixed reception when it came out. Some of the complaints were accurate and became deal breakers for people. Missing a new game option in the menu is particularly egregious. Some were just a matter of not liking what the game was going for, and that's perfectly valid. Some just seemed to materialize from the ether. I still don't get the complaints about the microtransactions. I didn't appreciate seeing the implication that Capcom was trying to monetize fast travel repeated so continuously, with so little understanding for the actual game's mechanics. But I'm not a channel that covers industry or gaming drama, and I don't want to be. I'd much rather spend my time showing off games, and if I have a problem with a game, it'll come from the game itself. I played the original Dragon's Dogma on both the Xbox 360 and PC, and I loved it then. When Dragon's Dogma 2 came out, what I wanted was for it to polish the adventure sim aspects of the first. I got exactly what I wanted. And while there are definitely areas that it could be improved, I'm very happy with the game we got. So join me as we go through Dragon's Dogma 2 and see the kind of unique experience it has to offer. Oh, and since there's no concern for trivializing bosses or gameplay, I don't plan to give myself any limits on how I play this one. The Mystic Spear Hand's shield and the Mystic Archer's Meister skills can overwhelm just about any enemy, even bosses. But I just didn't gravitate to them when I play. I might use them to show them off, but I plan to just generally switch around vacations. Which is something the game encourages, so it's not something I'm worried about. Okay, let's get started. When you first load up a game, you'll see that the title screen just says Dragon's Dogma. It'll change later, so just remember this for now. Once you start a new game, you get a quote about conviction. I suppose this is sort of the thesis of the game, so we'll be keeping an eye out for moments where it's reinforced in the writing. Then, we pan down to a feast of some kind in a castle. A man gives a speech about hardships his kingdom has experienced without a rightful ruler, and that they can now celebrate for having found the sovereign. There's a character that's walking towards the throne who's probably you. They're mostly obscured, but it's most likely not going to look like whatever character you end up making. After seeing some reactions from the crowd, the rest of the scene will play through in first person. You take the throne and goblet to make a toast to being the Arisen, chosen by the dragon as its enemy. Starting to get on familiar ground if you're coming in from the first game. When making the toast, time will pause as we hear a voice telling us that we must alter the course of fate. Pay attention to who's speaking here, it'll be important later. Then you'll collapse to the ground, ending the scene. The next scene takes us to the excavation site jail, and this is where you'll get your chance to make your own character. You can choose from a preset, but that's a waste. Obviously, I'll be making my own. The character creator is very extensive, and you can easily lose a lot of time to it. Given that there's another race to pick besides human, I decided to make a beastring character. How the game decides the default values from here is interesting. It's not just a list of presets per part you're changing, although it has that too. Instead, you select the body type you want, pretty standard, then you select the face you prefer over 3 instances, allowing you more freedom in where you want to start editing from. I wonder how they generate the following faces. Obviously, it's randomized in some aspect, but never to extreme degrees, so all the faces look pretty natural. I found a decent face to work from, but I have to deal with stupid hair for a bit. The rest of the editing is your standard set of sliders and presets. You'll note that some of the options for colors are a bit muted, and that's because the colors are tied to the dye system in the game. Without them, your colors tend to be more understated and grounded, but I like bright and vibrant, so I go for a brighter white and contrast it with darker stripes. Changing a few more sliders around, and I can finally change that stupid haircut. The beard's fine, but the hair needs to be something else. And since I darkened the stripes and brightened the fur, the color of the hair no longer matches, so let's fix that as well. Alright, that should about do it. But to be sure, we can check in different lighting and with armor. Okay, yeah, that'll work for me. Finally, it's time to choose a voice and a vocation. The voice is just a matter of finding something that makes sense coming from this body. Gallant Knight 2 seems to work. The first selection for vocation ultimately doesn't matter, so I'll just choose what I want to start the game with. In the last game, your vocation affected your stat growth, so there's an incentive to choose certain playstyles at certain times. In this game, switching classes will just switch stats, so no worries there. You can get some free equipment by switching classes, so you may want to start with another class. I'll show that later, but for now I think I'll just focus on the Archer class. And with that, we can get started. We get a cruel slave master of sorts giving some exposition about pawns and calling us dullards. He's got an interesting looking staff on his back. I wonder if that's going to come up later. Well, I'm a prisoner, so might as well get to work. After the game tells me I have add-ons added. Just a couple of weapons, I think? I probably won't be using them. From here, we get what is essentially the game's tutorial as we're introduced to mechanics bit by bit. We also get a preview of this area. We're not going to be able to do much other than the basics right now, but we will be coming back later. So far, we've got health and stamina, pretty standard, the minimap, which shows the person we should be following. We'll have more freedom on whether to follow this later, and a more unique mechanic of being able to pick up and move things and people. Also, Rook's back from the first game. Well, when we're done playing in the dirt, a Medusa will attack the prison and the guy with the staff will tell everyone to fight it, even at the cost of our lives. From here, we get a version of the Hydra fight from the first game. It's a preview of a late game enemy that you aren't expected to beat. It tears through the area we're in while we only have basic equipment and skills, but we're at least not fighting it alone. Since this is the first fight of the game, you're given a basic rundown of your class and how to use the carry mechanic in combat. Once the monster loses a health bar, the fight ends for now. We get a scene of a spooky ghost in a cloak telling us now might be a good time to leave in a voice notably different from the disembodied one we heard before. He seems like a beacon of trustworthiness, so Rook and I book it straight off a cliff. We'll skip the obvious playthrough ends here joke as we ride off into the sunset on the back of a griffin. The Spectre tells us to go and learn of the world we need to protect, so for now we can assume we're on the same side. Then we get a title drop and a nice flyover of the world we're going to be inhabiting. A character gets focus commanding a ballista bolt to fire. She must be important. The bolt strikes the griffin, one final landscape shot, then, in the time-honored tradition of the first game, Rook gets primed. Not only is this a fun in-joke, it's an important bit to show that death doesn't really mean much to the pawns. We also establish that the water is bad and should be avoided, and our next location. No sooner has Rook been dragged into the brine than some knights approach wondering why you're here right after a griffin was shot down. They'll ask you to join them back in their stronghold to treat your wounds. If you talk to the knights looking at the griffin, you can find out there's a cavern that's currently being blocked off. We'll come back to this eventually, I'm sure, but there are more important things to take care of right now. Your player doesn't really have any voiced lines, except for grunting for attacks, but traveling back with the knight will have him mention the jail you came from. So the player character does communicate with the other characters, but the player will have to do some work filling in the gaps. I'm alright with that. I'd rather have that than characters speak in a way that breaks how I imagine them for a game like this. On this short walk we get some more world dressing. We're in Vermund. We might have come from Batal, but the two are at odds because of a war. We also get our first encounter with goblins. We'll be fighting these a lot. They're never much trouble on their own, but they can be dangerous if they catch you off guard. There's more variety than you might expect, but we'll talk more on that later, because it's just the basic ones, and a little later one with a shield that leaps at you. This is still essentially a tutorial, and the game's letting you get more accustomed to the basics of whatever vocation you're using. When we get to our destination, a group of pawns comes out to greet us. I seem to have given my character anxiety while I was making the face. We're keeping it. The pawns take us to a riftstone, and now it's time to create our main pawn. Something you might not have realized if you haven't played these games before is that your body does have a small effect on gameplay. I'm a little faster with more stamina with a small body. I also tend to focus on classes like mages in games like these, so I want my main pawn to complement that. Pawn's class can be changed easily as well, but she's mainly going to be a fighter or warrior, I think. I also spend more time on the face here. With an animal face, you have a little more flexibility, but it's easy to accidentally push a human face into the uncanny valley. I changed the hair to make it easier to see the face while I do the edits, especially checking the ears. I'd hate for it to all look good just for a gust of wind to make me feel like I need to go back to the editor. When I get the face how I like it, I choose one of the long hair options. Then I need to choose the eye colors. I made the eyes of my pawn red last time. I'm going to avoid that this time because other players panic at the slightest hint of Dragon's Plague, despite that being obviously different. We'll talk more about Dragon's Plague later, but for now, we'll go with green eyes. A few more edits, check the lighting, and it's time to decide on a voice and a vocation. Pawns also get another choice, which is inclination. Inclination determines their general behavior, what they'll say, and how they'll banter with other pawns. I really like kind-hearted, and I find it goes good with classes meant to tank, so we'll be going with that. And I think the Sweet 3 voice fits the character best. Once character creation is finished, the pawn will be summoned from the rift. We get some more about pawns, and one of the knights will say that there should be only one Arisen and they're up in the capital. This is a weird one. We'll meet some other former Arisens later, so it's just that they can't exist at the same time most likely. We're pointed to Melv as our next location, and the game strongly hints that we should rest at an inn before we do anything else. Before that though, we're not just going to be traveling with only my main pawn. The first thing I need is a healer. None are immediately around, so I have to dive into the Riftstone. They won't have any other skills at our level right now, so I just need the basic heal. I also pick up another archer just so I have a full party. I want to get out of this prisoner outfit, but I'm lacking in funds. Thankfully, there's a quest or two nearby I can handle before heading to Melv. First, I need to find a guy who's supposed to be gathering supplies and tell him he needs to find more. These are still essentially the tutorial quests, so it isn't too far away. That said, it also means we're the ones who are actually going to be grabbing the supplies, of course. This quest is to show how to combine materials. This is the best way to get healing items, so it's important to make sure the player knows how to do it. Thankfully, you can mostly do this naturally without grinding out materials after this quest. Just be sure to use them before they go bad. Turning in the quest, and the screen to give the items gives 5 slots to put things in. 2 for a healing potion, and 3 for a potato. This is important because I don't have 3 of a specific potato. As long as the item fulfills the requirement, it can be turned in. And this will be true for other quests later. A big part of determining the outcome of some later quests is about how cleverly you can complete the requirements. Completing that quest also gives me enough money to buy some proper clothes. Now that I'm dressed, I go to head to Melv, but I'm interrupted by another quest. Most of the quests will happen like this, where you just wander into them. It's meant to make it feel like you're stumbling into adventures as you travel. And it works, for me at least. For this quest, we need to find a rookie knight, who got in over his head fighting some harpies. It's halfway between Melv and the outpost we're at, but that means we'll have to come back and report it. Harpies aren't too bad on their own, and even easier with 2 archers in the party. The focus is to keep them from attacking the guy we're trying to save. It's only a few harpies, so it doesn't take too long. He says he hopes to see us again, but I don't remember him having another quest here. Or maybe I missed it. I'll keep an eye out. I head back to the outpost to report the results of the quest. Then I finally set out for Melv. I get into a couple of fights on the way, but nothing super noteworthy. Just a bunch of goblins hidden in the trees. These minor encounters make a big part of the game loop, and they're fun, but don't give me a lot to talk about, so I won't be focusing on them unless something interesting happens. I will point out that this is another game with good world design and some excellent scenery. Once we get to Melv, we see how it was damaged by the dragon. Step into Melv and we hear that voice in our head again. That can't be good. We get a flashback to the dragon's attack on Melv to add context to how things went down. Regardless of what vocation you're currently using, you'll have to go through this section as a fighter. That's fine, you're not going to win here. This is a preview of the final boss and it doesn't last too long. Do any damage and you'll get a cutscene of your character not damaging the dragon and being consumed by its fire. The dragon eats your heart and we fade to black. When we fade back in, Ulrica will be watching over us. The game leans on the love interest flag a little heavily, but she's a nice enough character. She's got her own set of quests, so we'll come back to her later. We learned that we were taken to the castle under false pretenses. So when some knights come by saying we need to go to the castle with them, we're going to agree, obviously. First we're going to do some nearby quests. Priorities. The first one is simple enough. A girl needs to get some medicine, and I already have ingredients to make it. I enjoy having simple quests every now and then, where the only requirement is to just do a simple kindness for someone else. In the nearby tavern, we have Leonard, who gives a breakdown of how the starting locations work. He's also a Meister, and eventually we can get a Meister skill from him. But for now, we're just getting introductions out of the way. On the way out of town, we meet him again, and he gives us a quest to clear out some Saurians. We have to throw some explosive barrels at them, which is simple enough. This is very much still a tutorial quest, so isn't super interesting. Just toss barrel onto lizard. Turning in that quest immediately gives us another to toss poison onto the nest we were just at. I think something broke in this one. I tossed the poison to where the Saurians were, and nothing happens. I'll try to give the area some space and come back. Thankfully, there's another quest nearby to focus on. A guy lost his brother, Norbert, and we're going to help find him. Ian, the guy we're helping, can't quite remember where he sent his brother well enough to tell us where to go, so he's going to guide us instead. On the way out, I try to avoid passing through the gate. It won't force me to start the quest right away, but this will avoid them interrupting me to even ask the question. Just a little annoying, but I'm going to avoid it if I can. On the path Ian takes us is our first campsite, and a free camping kit. I'm going to give it to Faye to hold, but now we can make camp and rest for some time. This is part of the main game loop to recover health loss that doesn't recover through potions. I don't really need it now, it's not super late, I'm not really hurt, and normally I'd be careful about resting like this while on quests about rescuing someone. This is still effectively the tutorial though, so I'm not really worried, and I rest anyway. I don't have any fresh meat to cook. Thankfully rotten meat doesn't have any negatives, just not much of a bonus. The cooking animation is just actual video of a steak being cooked. It's funny to me every time. With that and a night's sleep, it's time to continue with the quest. On the way up, I find a golden trove beetle. These determine how much I can hold, so they're worth their weight in gold. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for more. Not too far away, and we catch up with Norbert, and we get our first fight with wolves. Wolves actually use pack tactics in this game, trying to surround and separate members of the party. The terrain keeps that from being too much of a hassle, guaranteeing that our first encounter won't get out of hand or be frustrating if you're playing a vocation that can't deal with them running away so often. Then again, if you are in that position, you really should have an archer or mage in your party. With the wolves defeated, we head back to town with Ian and Norbert. Ian has a little monologue about not letting fear stop him from doing the right thing. It's a nice little cap for a short quest. The poison jar is back too, but throwing it doesn't seem to work. I tried to trigger it a few more times, but no good. In hindsight, what I think has been happening is that the bodies were supposed to despawn and be replaced by something else. But because they had loot dropped, the bodies weren't allowed to despawn. I looted the bodies and I'll come back to see if I'm right, but for now we'll move on and join our escort down to the castle. Just got to sleep at an inn first. Always important before setting out on an adventure. Oh, and my pawn was already hired. I'll have to set a proper quest later. Before that though, I should check around the town for treasure. I don't know how soon I'll be back. And I found a Seeker's token. Let me just make a note on my map for that real quick. We'll need it for later. I should also stow away some things I'm carrying. I'm starting to have a little more weight than I want. Thankfully, it's mostly equipment, so I can just dump that in storage. Alright, with that, I'm ready to head out. Traveling with a full complement of knights means not really having to worry about the fights on the way there. Goblins at least create a good chance to test out different tactics. As we travel, we get a little more information about the Arisen being the ruler of Vermund, and that there have been people pretending to be the Arisen, with an implied threat if we are also found lying. We're stopped at a gate that Gregor opens for us. Since he's seen us command the pawns, it's worth bringing us at least as far as the castle, and if we're not really the Arisen, he can turn us in. We're the real thing, so we'll be fine, right? We're supposed to meet up with a cart to travel with back to Vermund, but no luck with that. Gregor wants us to just press on, but it's starting to get late. We're going to camp until morning, and look at that! The second camping kit we found right next to a campfire. The game is doing a good job of emphasizing that this will be an important part of our game loop, and providing the resource for it. A side note, while you're by the fire, you can start adding wood to it. This doesn't really do anything, but sometimes triggers dialogue from the pawns. Once it hits morning, we set off again. Before we get too far, there will be a rock slide. Marks of the dragon's fury, they say. Really, it's just a way to teach to watch for falling rocks, and set up our first encounter with a large monster. Traveling through the valley and past some minor enemies, we get to a dead end. A Cyclops bursts from the rubble in our way, but it's slightly damaged already. This is the part where Dragon's Dogma really starts to become Dragon's Dogma. The Cyclops is the most common of the large monsters the player will fight, so it's only fitting to start with it. A Cyclops normally isn't a difficult fight, but I'm still at an early level, so it's best to be cautious. Even then, their difficulty comes mostly from stomping around, making it hard to keep your footing. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is the first time the game really tells you that party composition and positioning matter. Whether a vocation has a dodge or a block depends on the role it's supposed to have in the party. Archer isn't meant to be close on its own, so I get thrown around a bit playing as if I was still a warfarer. Eldria has a much worse time than I do, so I have to go save her, and the Cyclops helpfully repositions me. Before too long, a sound will signal a flood that will rush down the valley, most likely knocking the Cyclops in the rocks, and opening the path forward. It does decent damage on its own, but once the Cyclops is down, you're guaranteed victory. Helping Gregor with the Cyclops earns his trust, and if we want, we can just go to the castle on our own now, or we can keep traveling with him. I figure we'll be walking all over the map eventually, so we can travel with them this time. This ox cart works like all the others we can use. Once we hop in, we can doze off to skip some travel time. And like usual, you're awakened by enemies attacking the cart. In this case, it's just a bunch of goblins. It doesn't take too long to take them out. I don't think they can easily break the cart on their own, but I keep them from getting near the cart just in case. With them out of the way, we're asked again if we want to keep traveling with the cart, and we already got the ambush out of the way, so of course we're going to. We finally get to Vernworth, and we see that guy from the intro. Despite having our traveling companions vouch for us, we're still brought in for questioning. Really, Brant is on our side and just making a show to avoid being suspicious. He fills us in on our antagonist for the current arc of the story. Disa is the Queen Regent and wants her son on the throne. The Arisen showing up means she loses her power and her son loses the throne. She had us poisoned and sold us to a foreign country as a slave, then had us replaced with a fake Arisen. A human Arisen. It's a little silly, but it's not story-breaking. No one in a position of power and who is willing to help us openly has seen our face as far as we know. The support that we do get has to come from out of sight of Disa. It gives a hero of the people setup, and the first few story quests are going to lean into that. Brant himself is going to be our source of quests that are required to continue the main story. He tells us where to meet him to follow up on that before telling the guards that we're free of suspicion and are clear to remain in the capital. The guards aren't paid enough to ask questions, so we won't be hassled again. Leaving the room, we bump into a kid and a guard demands his location. Given our introduction to the city, I point him in the wrong direction. The kid thanks us, but before we can properly introduce ourselves, the guard comes back around. Just more character setup, but nothing we need to worry about right now. From here, we've officially left the introduction and can go basically anywhere. As an introduction, it's a little rough, and it's got the text box tutorials, which I'm never really a fan of. But it's at least effective at getting the player in the rhythm of approaching the game in the way it wants to be interacted with. It's sort of a sampler of the whole gameplay experience outside the vocations. The story sets itself up well, though I don't think Amnesia is the most interesting choice. We had a defined starting point in the first game, so it's not like we couldn't have started with the attack on Melv here. Still, it gave them an excuse to pace out the story bits and establish the plot hooks and add some hints of mystery, so it works well enough as an opener. We'll see if they pay it off or not. For now, we know that we're Arisen, Disa is our relatively low-stakes villain for this part of the story, and our ultimate goal is to get strong and slay the dragon. That'll be all for now. Next time, we'll take a look around Burnworth and see what we find. What did you think of Dragon's Dogma 2? Did you play the first one? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and consider supporting me on Patreon if you can. I'll see you in the next one.
I knew that I could count upon your strength, Arisen.